Vanessa, will now move across to the Middle East and to Yemen.
Yes, where, of course, Yemen and Iran, where Trump has reignited the war against Yemen in defense of the security of Israel while it's recommitting a slightly paused genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. And effectively, under the first Trump administration, Trump scuppered the nuclear deal. He's now threatening Iran with war, effectively, if they don't rejoin negotiations for the nuclear deal that he effectively got rid of under his first administration. And of course, the supreme leadership in Iran is pushing back very hard and saying that they don't agree to negotiations with what is effectively a bully in the United States, particularly under President Trump. So what's actually happening? We're seeing a massive buildup of US military assets, both in West Asia or the Middle East, but also in Diego Garcia base, which I'll talk about more and explain exactly where it is. So first of all, we've got second aircraft carrier to the Middle East. Basically, there's already the USS Harry Truman, which will extend its deployment in the Red Sea for the war against Yemen. Now, the USS Carl Vinson and accompanying destroyers will join in the coming weeks. But not only this, there are F-35 fighters heading towards Israel. The Gold Refueling Group has confirmed that they're towing a pair of F-35 fighters into Israel, and further deployments in the Middle East continue. That's being reported across the board from the various open source intelligence agencies on social media. But then, in particular, we've seen US C-17 cargo carriers. We can just have a look at that, cargo planes flying into the Diego Garcia bases. Now, the C-17s are troop carriers and will be used to carry cargo to operating bases. Then finally, and this is probably the most sinister move by the United States, which is the bringing in of B-2 Spirit or stealth bombers. If we can just have a look at that again, these are coming into Diego Garcia, and we're hearing numbers between 4 to 7 B-2 Spirit bombers. Now, what's interesting, these bombers in particular have been used to deploy bunker buster bombs that, of course, are designed to target the underground weapon facilities, potentially in this case in Iran, but they also have the capability to carry nuclear weapons. So this is where this becomes extremely dangerous as regards escalation. Where is Diego Garcia? Well, it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's actually a British base that has been leased to the United States for 99 years. It's a base which is shrouded in secrecy. I'll come on to that at the end. But if we have a quick look at the tag, so the Indian Ocean island was notably used as a primary launch pad for bomber strikes in the opening phases of Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan 2001, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I love this use of the word freedom by the United States. In 2003, and actually against Serbia by NATO in 1999. It's very important to note here, this is from the article, that Diego Garcia, unlike bases in the Middle East or aircraft carriers operating in the region, is largely out of the reach of the missiles and drones available now to either Ansarullah or Iran. Iran's current longest range ballistic missiles are generally assessed to have maximum ranges around 1,242 miles. However, I have to say in the last 48 hours, Iran has unveiled missiles that have a range of 1,700 miles, and they've also unveiled new underground military development centers and bases and missile launch centers, and the 3 disputed islands at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, which directly threaten actually the Gulf states. So clearly Iran is responding to Trump's military escalation with their own version of a military escalation against what Trump is progressing with. This is actually back in 2015, April 2015, a bombing of the Faj Atan mountain in Yemen using the B-2 bombers, just to give people an idea of the bombs that will be deployed by these bombers. And the bomber itself, the B-2 bomber, costs $1 billion to make. So the fact that 7 of those bombers, I think there's only 22 in existence and now being moved to Diego Garcia, is a strong signal from Trump. Now, coming on to a BBC article that I found this morning, which was kind of interesting. This was what I found on the secretive tropical island they don't want you to see. Now, why I say this is interesting, what does the BBC talk about? It talks about the fact that, of course, Mauritius, which won independence from the UK in '68, maintains that the islands are its own, and the UN's highest court has ruled in an advisory opinion that the UK's administration of the territory is unlawful and must end. It is said that the Chagos Island should be handed over to Mauritius in order to complete the UK's decolonisation. Clive Baldwin, senior legal advisor at Human Rights Watch, says the forced displacement of the Chagosians by the UK and US, their persecution on the grounds of race, and the ongoing prevention of their return to their homeland amounts to crimes against humanity. So while explaining that this island is shrouded in secrecy, media is forbidden entry, the BBC apparently had to go through a huge number of hoops to be able to actually get onto the island and be given a very much a guided tour around. Interesting that the security company G4S was sent to accompany them. And all they mention are this basically colonization issue, which is a major issue, but they also talk about the fact that potentially the CIA has black sites on Diego Garcia. But for me, this doesn't explain the extreme secrecy over the military bases on this island, and one wonders what else is being developed there.
Some good questions. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay.
And what's been going on in Turkey?
Well, actually, it's more about the potential for Israeli-Turkey conflict inside Syria, for influence inside Syria. So first of all, we'll look at what the two countries perceive as their agenda or their rights in Syria. First of all, Erdogan, Turkey, very much a backer of if we can just have the slide, of the HTS Al-Qaeda factions inside Syria that have taken control of Damascus since the 8th of December, are conducting ethnic cleansing pogroms in pretty much all of Syria. But Erdogan advocates for a unified and stable nation, inclusive of all societal groups, which of course means that he has control of all of Syria, because Syria will be controlled by HTS and the Syrian National Army, which is the former Free Syrian Army, all under control of Turkey, and of course aligned also with Qatar, another controller of the Muslim Brotherhood factions inside Syria. But let's have a look now at what Israel perceives as its agenda in Syria. And of course, Israel is very much along the lines of the clean break doctrine from 1997, which talks about the fragmentation of the region into smaller states. And basically, Israel is using the persecution of the Alawites, the Druze sects, and the Kurds in Syria to create statelets, which will effectively still be under the control of Israel, acting as proxies of Israel. And of course, we know now that Russia is effectively in discussions with Israel over Russia consolidating its military bases in the coastal area, red area there, and potentially taking control of that partitioned segment, which would, in inverted commas, give protection for the Alawites that are currently being slaughtered by the Takfiri project control very much of Turkey, although it's a little bit more complex than that. Now, what has been happening recently, we've talked about the fact that Russia and Israel might align to push back against Turkish expansionism in Syria and in the region. But what's happening more recently is that it's actually escalated beyond that. So we've seen, this is a report in my Zionist think tank, in Syria, Turkish presence in military airports and aerial friction with Israel. So what does this actually mean? Yesterday, Israel bombed an area of Syria to the east of Homs, Palmyra and the T4 military base, which were former Syrian Arab Army air bases and military bases. But the red line there shows Israel's potential David corridor, which will extend from the south area. We've talked about it before. So, what is interesting is that Turkey has been moving its own military advisors into these bases to develop military capability for HTS, for the factions it should have control of a unified Syria. And then if we look at another article that has been published recently, Israel and Turkey on collision course in Syria after Palmyra airstrikes. So again, this points out the fact that Israel was effectively potentially targeting Turkish military in former Syrian Arab army bases in this area. And then from the article, a quote from Nimrod Goran from the Mitveen Institute. Unlike Turkey, which supports a strong, centralized and stable Syria, Israel at the moment appears to prefer Syria fragmented, with the belief that it could better bolster Israel's security. So confirmation there. And Netanyahu today put out an announcement that he was to convene a security meeting over Turkish involvement in Syria. So as I said, we seem to be heading to at least some degree of contestation over Syrian territory between Israel and Turkey. And I'm quite sure that the destabilization currently ongoing in Turkey is no coincidence on that basis also. And then in the south, what has Israel been doing? Again, it's been expanding and advancing. This is a headline in the Jerusalem Post today. The IDF engages in firefight with so-called terrorists in southern Syria. In reality, Israel is trying to expand its land grab in the south, and it was pushed back by local fighters in the areas where it's trying to advance. They are now, of course, termed terrorists. And if we have a quick look at the map, you can see the two areas that I'm talking about that were under attack. First of all, in the south there, in a village called Zawaya, west of Dara, that is where Israel is advancing and entrenching, and the bombing of those bases, as I said, in central Syria, which again also demonstrates the extent to which Turkey is also trying to expand into central Syria. And at the same time, in Haimamim, Russia is moving greater numbers of troops into Haimamim under the pretext of protecting its own convoys. There are more than 7,000 Syrian Alawites that have gathered in the Haimamim base for protection. And in fact, the military hardware is being built up around the base. Now, yes, it could be protection for Russian convoys. It could also be the start of that consolidation of Russian military presence in the coastal area and the providing of that pretext of protection for the Alawites and the Christians and even the Sunnis that are opposed to the Takfiri project. So very fluid, a lot of swapping and changing of alliances in order to consolidate power inside Syria, with, in my opinion, very little regard for the actual Syrian people, which I guess is pretty normal.
And you think that Israel will be involved in some way in this destabilization within Turkey itself?
I think it's too much of a coincidence that it's been kicked off now. I do also think that there's potential that Erdogan is playing a part in this, because by creating the instability, he can bring in emergency law, which then potentially would allow him to make changes in the constitution to extend his presidency beyond the next 3 years, which he's currently not able to do. And also it scuppers the deal with the PKK, the Kurdish so-called terrorist factions, that he was in the process of negotiating. He may well not want that to go through because, of course, it's the Kurdish separatist factions that are under the control of Israel and the US in the northeast that potentially would become that autonomous region linked with Israel. So it's very messy at the moment, and I think a lot of things don't add up. A lot of things are not as they appear initially. So I do think that destabilization that is ongoing in Turkey has a lot to do with what is going on in Syria, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.